So one of the most exciting things about genealogy today is genetic genealogy. And today I'm going to look at some of my results with Ancestry and compare them to what I've already researched using the paper trail. And I find some interesting things, some things that can be told by DNA and some things that cannot. For example, I'll be using a new feature from Ancestry DNA that allows someone to see which genes he or she inherited from each of his or her parents. So please join me in exploring my DNA so that might help you with yours. So the first thing I would like to talk about with Ancestry.com is their new Ethnicity Inheritance. They can now show how much you are getting from each of your parents. Unfortunately, they can't show you which parent you're getting the DNA from. So you have parent 1 and parent 2, as you can see on this screen. Through doing certain estimations, I have figured that probably the left-hand side is my mother's and probably my right-hand side is my father's. And I'm going to show you how I came about this. So let me first show you a couple of things. I'm going to break this down. You can see on the bottom here. So on the left, you have parent 1 and parent 2, and you can see the breakdown. This is color coded, so it shows, for instance, this is Spanish over here, this is Indigenous Americas, Mexico over here, and so forth. And then it shows the full range right here. If you go down further, you'll see that it breaks it down by parent. Now, you inherit exactly 50% of your mother's DNA and exactly 50% of your father's DNA. And so if you look at this, for instance, my Spanish DNA is 52%, but one parent, it's only 24%, and the other one is 28%. That's where I'm getting the breakdown from. Indigenous Americas, it's 19%, with 9% coming from one parent and 10% from the other. England and Northwestern Europe, which is what I'm going to be studying here, is 10% on one parent and 0 on the other one. Basque, Indigenous Americas, European Jewish, Sweden and Denmark, Norway, etc. So the first thing I want to do is kind of show you what I would consider my Mexican American ancestry, and that would be Spain, Indigenous Americas, Mexico, Basque, Indigenous Americas North, and Indigenous Americas, Yucatan Peninsula, and possibly this Cameroon, Congo, and Western Bantu peoples, okay? Possibly even this European Jewish ancestry over here, although that could easily be something else. So if I click all of those, you'll see how they show up here. Now let's take off the European Jewish, and let's take off the Cameroon, Congo, and Western Bantu. And you'll see this could be what my Mexican American ancestry looks like, okay? Now I have other type of ancestry. I have, and I'll show you that here in just a second. So this is my pedigree that I put on Ancestry. And the parts that I'm really interested in right now with my genetic genealogy has to do with 2 of my ancestors, Philip Bourguignon, okay, who was from Germany, and Samuel Zimmerli, who was from Switzerland. They're both great-great-grandparents. They both came to New Mexico. Well, Philip Bourguignon probably came to New Mexico in the 1950s. So prior to the Civil War. He may have been captured down south near Las Cruces in 1862. And my great-grandfather Samuel Zimmerly came to New Mexico with the California Column in response to the invasion of New Mexico by the Texas Confederates. Now, let me show you one other thing. This is a timeline of New Mexico history and genealogy and how it relates to my own genealogy. So prior to 1492, only Native American cultures were here in the Americas. And when I mean Americas, I mean North America and South America. We're going to focus on North America, though, mostly Mexico North. In 1519 to 1521, Hernan Cortez conquers the Aztec Empire, which begins the conquering of Mexico. In the 1530s, you have a number of people exploring what is now New Mexico. And by 1540, Francisco Vasquez de Coronado comes to New Mexico, spends a couple winters up here, and then comes back down. It will take a number of years past that before actual colonization happens in New Mexico. And so the first Spanish colonists arrive in New Mexico under the leadership of Juan de Oñate in 1598. Many of my deep Spanish Mexican ancestors come from that, either in 1598 or 1600. For instance, my Baca ancestors come in 1600. In 1680, because of the cruel way that the Spaniards were treating the Pueblo Indians, there was a Pueblo revolt in New Mexico under the leadership of a man by the name of Pope. The Spaniards are expelled from New Mexico. They live down in the El Paso, Juarez area. And then by 1692, 1693, they reconquest New Mexico under the leadership of Diego de Vargas. Within that time, a number of people come into New Mexico. At this time, Spain does not allow anyone to come through who is not part of the Spanish Empire. So you may get some Germans, you may get some French, but they are allowed to be here. Okay. And I don't see a whole lot of that non-Spanish, non-Mexican people in my ancestry, but there are a few in others. Maybe Italian with the Pinos, but other than that, I don't see a whole lot of that within my own ancestry. But some people might, like the Gourelets, the Archevêques are French people. You've got a number of Germans who come in, and others like that. But again, they're here by permission of the Spanish Empire. In 1821, Mexico gets independence from Spain. At that point is when you have the Santa Fe Trail open up. And so you have Americans and other Europeans coming into New Mexico legally for the first time without having to have permission by the Spanish Empire. It's now under Mexico. In 1846, United States invades Mexico, comes into New Mexico without a fight at first. There are some skirmishes, some Mexican Americans are killed and such. But by 1848, the war ends. And of course, half of Mexico is lost to the United States, including New Mexico. By 1850, New Mexico becomes a U.S. territory. In 1861 and 1865, the American Civil War is occurring. There are a few battles that happen here in New Mexico when Texas Confederates invade New Mexico. but they are quickly expelled within months. And again, like I said, had Philip Bourguignon was here prior to that, and Samuel Zimmerly will come with thousands of others in response to the Confederates invading New Mexico. By 1912, New Mexico becomes the 47th state of the United States, just before Arizona, and of course before Alaska and Hawaii. So we've been a state for over 100 years. That would be 110 years now. But we have a deep history going back, well, prior to 1492. Many Native American people living in this area. My ancestry, both the paper trail and DNA, shows that I have inherited a lot of DNA from Native Americans. Some will be from Mexico, some will be from New Mexico and elsewhere. So that is the basic history and genealogy as it applies to my own genealogy and to the genealogy of many New Mexicans. If you're a Hispanic New Mexican whose family's been here for 300 to 400 years, you will have a similar ancestry. You will have a similar history. And so again, this is where my genealogy is showing. So let's go back to my genealogy, my DNA results. So here are my DNA results again. As I mentioned, this is kind of what I'm looking at possibly as my Mexican American heritage. You've got 52% being Spanish, a good chunk, nearly a quarter being some sort of indigenous people, and then others. So it would be very difficult for me to try to figure out exactly who these people are. So my ancestry is very insensitive. I have a lot of information on my family tree. It goes back 12, 13, 14 generations. So that's not a problem. But to break this down any further and saying this is this ancestor and this is that ancestor would be very difficult, except when I come towards my second great grandfathers, Bourguignon and Zimmerly. But here's the question: where do they come from? Where do they show up on this? So my mom is the Zimmerly family. My dad is a Bourguignon family, exact genetic distance, great grandfathers. So what I'm going to look at are those things that I don't see as necessarily Spanish Mexican heritage. That would be England and Northwestern Europe. That would possibly be European Jewish, although that could be Spanish. I wish they broke this down as Sephardic and Ashkenazi Jewish, but they don't. That would be a lot simpler. Sephardic would definitely be Spaniard. Ashkenazi would most likely be German. Then you have Swedish and Denmark, Norway, and these could possibly be within the Spanish ancestry, but I don't know. Eastern Europe and Russia. I have Sardinia, which I'm thinking is going to be more with the Spanish because you're talking about Italy. Those areas used to be part of Spain, so I'm thinking that's what it is. And I'm not thinking any of the Cameroon. I'm thinking that would be more with my Spanish heritage, but then again, I don't know. So this is possibly my German and Swiss ancestry. Okay, so if you look at this, parent one has a ton of England and Northwestern Europe. Now, that doesn't mean that I have a British ancestor. If you look at the chart, at the map, you're talking a lot about Germany and France and all that. So that could be Philip Bourguignon. That could also be Samuel Zimmerli. Now, I should have around 6.25% of DNA from both Bourguignon and Zimmerli. 6.2 from each of them, okay? And, but I'm showing a lot of non-Hispanic ancestry. Now, the thing you got to know is that you're not going to get exactly the percentage that you would think you would get, okay? Sometimes you inherit a lot more than you think you would get. Sometimes you inherit a lot less than you would think you would get. And that's just by genetic chance. You get half of your ancestry from your mother and half of your ancestry from your father. Well, what that means is that your great-grandparent, or your grandparents, you're getting 25, 25, 25, 25. But since you're only getting half from your father and it's a random half, you're not necessarily getting 25 from your grandfather and 25 from your grandmother. You might be getting 28% from your grandfather and 22% from your grandmother. And the same thing with your maternal ancestors, okay? And then as you go up, grandfather, great-grandfather, or great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, etc., you'll see even more differences in percentages. Now, again, we can't figure out exactly how that works. We don't have the technology right now unless you test with your grandparents and your great-grandparents and all that, which is impossible for me to do. So it's just an estimation, you know, as someone has more than others. And at some point, those ancestors start disappearing from your DNA. You do not inherit certain ancestors, going back maybe third great-grandparents or fourth great-grandparents, and especially by fifth and sixth and etc. You start losing those genetic markers for those ancestors. Again, we can't really tell who they are. There are certain ways to try to figure out certain things, but it's extremely difficult. So again, let's look at this. It's obvious that I have more non-Hispanic ancestry on one side than on the other side. All right. It's over about 14% on this side and probably around 8, maybe 6% on that side. So it's definitely not equal. All right. So I'm definitely not getting the same amount. And as far as I know, this might not be all be my Bourguignon and Zimmerli ancestry. Maybe somehow other ancestry is showing up here that I don't know about, or maybe it's just showing up because it's similar to others. So let me show you a couple other things. So this is my aunt's DNA. I've set it so that you can't see who she is and all that, but I wanted to point out a few things. First, I share 26% of my DNA with her, a significant amount, as you would imagine. As an aunt, she would have that much DNA, somewhere around 25%. And that's 1,822 centimorgans along 55 segments. Now let's delve into her results compared to mine. So here's the comparison between my maternal aunt and myself. So this is my mother's sister. And you can see here that we both have a considerable amount of Spanish ancestry. Mine is showing as 52%. Hers is showing up as 51%. Then you've got Indigenous Americas. Mine is 19. Hers is 17. England and Northwestern Europe. Now, this is the interesting part. So I've got 10%. She has 12%. Okay. Is that significant? All right. Is that where I'm getting that English and Northwestern Europe ancestry, which is specifically Northwestern Europe? Okay. I don't see that I would have any British ancestry at all, not direct at least. So is that where I'm getting this? Possibly. So I wanted to compare it to a few other things, a few other people. So here is my aunt's son, my first cousin. Both of my aunt's sons have done their DNA. They have different fathers because my first uncle died in a car accident, and my aunt remarried, and so she has children from two different fathers. So here's my first cousin, the eldest of the two, who shares 16% of my DNA, or about 1,111 centimorgans over 49 segments. And what I know about my cousin's DNA is that he has a more recent ancestor who is not Hispanic. And I believe that's a great grandfather. So you may see some other stuff in here. So again, Spain, he's getting about 49% Spanish, as opposed to my 52, 18% Indigenous Americas, Mexico, and then 1% England or Northwestern Europe. Now that's the interesting thing. His mother has 12, he has 1. You got other things. You got some Swedish and Denmark, again, European Jewish, and then some down here, Wales, North Africa, Portugal, South Italy, Cameroon, Congo, West Bantu. Some of these are not showing up on me. I don't have anything in Wales or North Africa or Portugal or Southern Italy. So this may be from his father's side, or it may be some genealogy that I'm not inheriting. Again, this is why you'll see siblings don't match. Okay, sometimes they'll say that one sibling has ancestry in Africa and the other one doesn't, or one is Irish and the other one's not. And that's because you get a random combination of genetics from your parents. You only get half of your mothers and half of your fathers, and then it's not exactly the same half. And as you go down further with cousins, you're getting even less. So it wouldn't be surprising that he's inheriting things from his mother, who is related to my mother, that I'm not getting. But I'm thinking the Wales ancestry, that high has to be from his father's ancestry rather than his mother's. It would make sense with who his great grandfather is. So let me go ahead and show you my aunt's younger son. This is my other cousin, 13% shared DNA, 918 centimorgans across 46 segments. Again, first cousin, my aunt's son from a different father. So this is his DNA. The Spanish ancestry is almost exact, 52%. It is exact, in fact. Indigenous, he has a little bit more. Indigenous Americas, less Basque, more Indigenous Americas North. European Jewish, 2%. Norway, Sardinia, and no England and Northwestern Europe ancestry. So interesting combination here. Again, we get different things from different people. So let me show you a couple others just to compare. This is who I believe to be my mother's first cousin. He has a different first name than he usually goes by, but it's also a name that I know is his name. So he hasn't responded to me, so I don't know if this is who he is, but I'm pretty sure that he is. So again, Spanish 42%, Indigenous 22%, England, Northwestern Europe. Here we go, 6%. He's boom, more of that England and Northwestern Europe. This would be the Zimmerli. This would most likely be the Zimmerli family right here, as with my aunt was the Zimmerli family. So this is my aunt's cousin too. So a lot of European Jewish, some Germanic Europe. That's an interesting one. So maybe that he's inheriting things that I'm not inheriting as far as that is concerned. Let's look at another cousin. So this is one of my cousins on my paternal side, first cousin once removed. This is my paternal aunt's granddaughter, or my cousin's daughter. And as you can see, 40% Spain, 26% Indigenous. Let's go back down here. Norway, 2%. European Jewish, 2%. Germanic Europe, 4%. Sardinia, 2%. There's Sardinia again. I'm getting a lot of that Sardinia in there. And then she has Portugal, Ireland, North Africa, Wales. These are not showing up. Aegean Islands, Arabian Peninsula, Senegal. Now that's probably from her mother's side, who is not directly related to me. So this, she's got some of that Germanic Europe. She's got, but she doesn't have, she doesn't have the England and Northwestern Europe. So this would be the Bourguignon side, as opposed to Zimmerli. Let me show you one more. This is a relative. I have a number of siblings, not my siblings, they're siblings of each other, who are related to me 3 different ways. Twice on my mom's side, once on my dad's side. And as far as the dad's side, that's the Bourguignon family. And so if we look at this, we'll see here England and Northwestern Europe. So are the Bourguignons showing up as England and Northwestern Europe? I don't know. We also have Sweden and Denmark down there, Eastern Europe and Russia, Germanic Europe, and then a bunch of things that are not the same as me. Scotland, Northern Italy, Portugal, France, Indigenous Americas, Yucatan Peninsula, Senegal. Okay, again, maybe this is probably ancestors that are not in any way related to me. These people are genetic descendants, 3rd or 2nd cousin once removed, depending on which ancestor we're talking about. They're related to me through my mom's Bacas, Ramon Baca, Anastasia Padilla, through my mom's Torres family, Jose Epitacio Torres and Maria Guadalupe Padilla, and through my dad's Bourguignon family, Philip Bourguignon, Maria Tomasa Montoya. No, Gonzalez, sorry, Maria Tomasa Gonzalez. So they're related to me 3 times. It's very difficult to figure out, exactly where they're at. But again, here we go. We have none of that. No, we do have some of that England and Northwestern Europe. Okay, so where is all this showing up in? So let's go back to that chart of my my breakdown between parents. Okay, so again, on the one side, you've got that England and Northwestern Europe, and that's all where it's showing it. Now, how accurate, for instance, is it that this is actually showing my mother's side and my father's side? So here's from the Ancestry DNA website on ethnicity inheritance. Your ethnicity inheritance estimates which regions you inherited from each parent. Find it beneath your ethnicity estimate. To learn how much we identify this, see how side view technology splits your DNA results by parent, and I'll show you that in a minute. One or both of your parents could have passed down each of your regions. The estimated regions from one parent plus the estimated regions from the other parent make up your ethnicity estimate. So here, for instance, is the example. The percentages in your ethnicity estimate are the most likely percentages, but there are other possibilities too. The same is true of the percentages of your ethnicity inheritance. They're the most likely estimates, so they may not be exact. Not your parents' full ethnicity estimates. Each parent passed down half of their DNA to you. That means that there's half of their DNA that you didn't inherit. Your ethnicity inheritance only shows the parts of their DNA that you inherited. This means you're seeing only half of each parent's estimated ethnicity. So again, you might not get certain parts of your parents' ethnicity, and they may not get certain parts of their parents' ethnicity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these are just estimates. They could be way off, and really it's really hard to figure out where everything's coming from. Again, this is from the Ancestry DNA website. How side view trademark technology splits your DNA results by parent. When we first read your DNA, we don't know which parts of your DNA come from each parent. Ancestry developed a technology called side view to sort this out using DNA matches. Because a match is usually related to you through your only one parent, your matches can help us organize the DNA you share with them. Side view technology powers your ethnicity inheritance, the portion of each region you inherited from each parent. This enables us to provide your ethnicity inheritance without testing your parents, though we don't know which parent is which. So this is the problem. They don't know which parent is which. And so what they do is they look at your DNA, and DNA is coded like they have here. When we first read your DNA, it's all along just a long line of these famous DNA letters, A, G, C, and T. These are the building blocks of DNA. One letter in each row comes from each parent. For example, on the top row, the A comes from one parent and the G comes from the other, but we don't know which letter came from whom. The same is true with C, T, G, and G, and so on. Your actual ancestor DNA results are a bit longer, more like 700,000 pairs of letters. So basically what they do is they split these apart and they figure out this is coming from one parent and this is coming from the other. Again, they have no idea which parent it's coming from. Apparently they can't figure out male and female through these lines. These are just the stuff that you inherited from your parents. They're only looking at a small portion of your DNA. If they tried to look at everything else, it would take them forever to do it. It costs them a lot of money and all this. And really, they only need to look at a certain small percentage of your DNA, because almost 100%, 99.7, 99.9, somewhere around there, is exactly the same from person to person. So my DNA, as opposed to someone from Aborigine from Australia, is almost exactly the same, even though the Aborigines have been separated from a lot of other parts of humanity for 40, 50,000 years, right? And so we still have this very similar DNA. We're all cousins, right? Okay. So, but there's a small portion that they use to actually decide how you're related to someone, and it's actually fairly accurate. There are some things that aren't 100% accurate, but it's fairly accurate. I have found cousins where they should be on the line. Genetic distance is almost exactly what it should be. So I actually have a lot of faith in these DNA results. So let's go back to this breakdown, this ethnicity breakdown, the ethnicity inheritance. And I am just going to pick this one inheritance here because it only shows on one side. England and Northwestern Europe, 10% on one side. It seems, and I would love it if I could, if I had, I have two paternal aunts who are still alive. Love it if I could get their DNA in the database too and compare it, because then I would be seeing closer to what I inherited as Bourguignon family. Now I do have a lot of Bourguignons on there, and they're all over the place, so it's hard to do it. So pretty much I'm comparing this to my aunt's and her cousin's DNA, and that is they seem to have a lot of England and Northwestern Europe ancestry. And I have a lot of, and I have England and Northwestern Europe only on the one side. So the left-hand side, parent number one, I'm thinking is my mother's ancestry. I may be completely wrong, 50-50 chance, right? But I'm thinking this is my mother's ancestry. Parent number two is my father's ancestry. I would have to do more research again if I was to have more relatives who are closer related, maybe even some more cousins. I don't have any first cousins on my father's side who have tested either. I have first cousins on my mother's side who are the sons of my aunt who is also tested, but I don't have any first cousins on my father's side. And if I could have that, then I could compare it. One other cousin that I have who is one of my dad's first cousins, which would be first cousin once removed, is also related to my mom through the Zimmerli line. So he's got Bourguignon and Zimmerli in addition to some other non-Hispanic ancestry. So it would be very difficult to just pull that apart. I would love to be able to say, oh, yeah, we can see where it is, but his mixture is similar to mine, you know, because he's got Bacas and he's got Bourguignons and he's got Zimmerlis, and it's like, well, where, you know, what? How do you break that down? Again, this is not a perfect science. You know, it's using data that can be easily figured out, but it's, you know, you're not going to get exactly the DNA from your mom and exactly the DNA from your dad. You're getting only half from each, and your brothers or sisters are only getting half, and not necessarily the same half. In fact, most likely not the same half. Unless you're an identical twin, you're not getting the same percentages. You're not getting the same DNA, just half on one side and half on the other. And that's why DNA, you know, the science is pretty good. It's just that the data is not going to be perfect because there's no way that you could find that. Now, if my parents had been alive when this technology became available to consumers, I could have had them tested and compared their DNA, but I can't do that. So this is the best way of looking at it. So again, my estimate is parent number one is my mom, parent number two is my dad. and hopefully that's correct. Anyhow, I do have some other information I want to go through to show you how I can prove certain things, such as who my ancestors are. I can prove that my father is my father, even though my father's not alive, because that's always a question, right? You always know who your mother is. You don't always know who your father is. I can prove that through different ways, and I'll be showing that to you in a different video. I'm Robert Baca, the Socorro genealogist. Keep searching for your family.